Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives, and today we will be concluding our discussion on the Spider-Verse tie-ins to Secret Wars as we take a look at Spider-Verse Volume 2, Number 5. Now, last time on Spider-Verse. After the Spider team was brought back to Norman at Oscorp, he explained that the reason why they've been all having lingering memories of their lives before Battleworld is because they all still have latent connections to the Web of Life and Destiny, which, while in tatters, still somewhat remains. And Norman has actually been studying it, and he believes that with the Spidey's help, they can actually learn to kind of tap into it and potentially find a way for the Spideys to return home. Spider-Gwen, however, thinks that Norman is full of it and pretty much goes, "Screw you guys, I'm leaving," and abandons both the team and Oscorp. However, as she travels around New York, she ends up running into this domain's version of Peter Parker, who reveals that the reason why he hasn't been Spider-Man for the last few years is because, one, he has lost his powers, and two, well, the mayor of New York is Norman Osborn, who is just crazy and has been hunting for Peter for years. Which, yeah, that's part of the reason why Peter is even meeting up with Gwen at all, because he wants to let her know that. That even gets confirmed as not even a few seconds after Peter shows himself. Venom makes himself known and reveals that he'd been trailing Gwen on Norman's orders. While the pair are able to ultimately deal with Venom, they also realize that they need to find a way to get Norman away from the other Spideys, because the instant he realizes that Gwen knows that he's crazy, then he's going to probably kill them without a second thought. As such, Peter and Gwen end up laying a trap as they send Norman a picture of Peter calling him out to the George Washington Bridge, and Norman, being a psychopath who just wants to see Peter dead, ends up taking the bait and leaves Oscorp with the Sinister Six, sans Electro, who Norman leaves behind to keep an eye on the remaining Spideys. However, as the Spideys continue their work, they end up learning of Norman's craziness through another source, as Spider-Ham reveals that Norman likes to spend his time sitting in what he calls a Caesar's Palace chair, and when the Spideys go to see what this chair is, it turns out that it is the Siege Paralysis, an artifact which is supposed to be able to tap into the very fabric of reality. And yeah, it turns out that Norman's planning to utilize this to pretty much go up against Dr. Doom, who, I have to remind you, on Battleworld is honest to goodness a god. And it's clear that he's been utilizing the Web of Life and Destiny to enhance its powers, because the instant those Spideys get close to the Siege Paralysis, it begins sparking, and ultimately that sparking ends up alerting someone from higher up, as last as you end it with one of the Thors of Battleworld, a female variant, appearing in Oscorp and telling the Spideys to get away from the chair, which is where this issue picks up. Now, like with last issue, a bunch of plot stuff is happening simultaneously throughout the book, so I'll try to keep things as straight as possible, but I'm not going to be able to kind of keep them as coordinated as I could, so I'm going to be jumping around a little, so apologies in advance. Either way, the comic actually opens up on the George Washington Bridge as Norman, the Sinister Six, and a few of Norman's guards arrive, and Norman wants to know why the hell Peter's even here, because apparently years prior, Norman actually killed Spider-Man. Peter ends up confirming that the person that he killed was actually Ben Reilly, which again further adds to my whole he lost his powers during the Clone Saga of this universe thing. But yeah, Norman, while he's happy to have that question answered, he's also more than pleased to have another chance at getting Peter. And Peter is happy to give him the chance, as he ends up jumping right at him and begins, well, just swinging away. Which, yeah, this is all part of the plan. Pretty much, Peter is distracting Norman and the Sinister Six, while Gwen has to go back to Oscorp to try and get to meet up with the other Spideys. There are unfortunately only two problems with that. One, Peter doesn't have his spider powers, and so while Peter swings away on his webs, well, keep in mind, swinging from building to building when you're a normal person is a lot harder than it actually sounds. And realistically, I know people will say, well, his arms should get ripped out of their sockets if he does that, but I'm willing to give some benefit of the doubt and let that slide for comic's sake, though Peter does end up going ow, ow, ow every time he swings, and even admits to himself, why did I even miss this? However, yeah, Norman thinks this is just a joke, which I have to remind you that Norman and the Sinister Six are on gliders, and so pretty much he just ends up swooping in and grabs Peter with a lasso, planning to pull him in, and even asks, well, what were you hoping to accomplish here? And Peter admits that he wasn't planning to really accomplish anything. He wasn't doing this to have a final confrontation with Norman. He was doing it for Gwen. At which point Norman realizes exactly what Peter was doing, and he orders the remaining members of the Sinister Six and his guards to head right back to Oscorp immediately. In the meantime, back with Oscorp, Gwen finally decides to go in, and thankfully the window that she smashed open to leave Oscorp before is still has not been repaired, so Gwen goes in through that window, fully expecting to fight some of the goons there. Only when she arrives, it turns out the place is vacant. The lab where they were studying the web is completely shut down since nobody's working in it, so it's just gone dark. So Gwen at first is like, well, okay, well, I wonder what everyone else is doing. Or suddenly a lightning bolt bursts right through the room from the floor above, which, yeah, that room above is where the siege paralysis is, and Spider-Man Noir then pokes his head out and tells Gwen that they might need a little help. Yeah, it turns out that after the Thor from last issue showed up, she started attacking the various Spideys, because since they're connected to the web, and the web is resonating with the siege paralysis, a device that essentially is a threat to Doom. Well, this Thor considers the Spideys a threat to Doom also, and is ready to try and destroy them. While the Spideys are doing their best to try and convince Thor that they're on her side, well, she's not really believing it, and so she's just not giving them a single quarter of she's not even giving them a single quarter. As such, while the Spideys are doing their best to duke it out with the Thor, sadly, well, this is a literal thunder god versus a bunch of people whose greatest gimmick is that they can shoot webs out of their wrists and stick to walls. It's very much clear it's a losing battle, and even the Spideys begin to realize that. While Spider-Ham does offer to throw his hat into the ring as well, because, well, hey, he's an anthropomorphic cartoon pig, and even admits he can get hit really hard and then be able to get back up later. Well, even that doesn't really do much, as he jumps right at the Thor, and she just ends up smacking him through several walls right into a cafeteria, which does not kill him. But it's clear again that this Thor is out of his class. Though that also does get the attention of Electro, who was in said cafeteria, and the instant he sees Ham plow right in there, he's like, "Okay, what the hell are you what the hell are you spiders doing?" But running out, which thankfully leaves his sandwich alone for Ham to pick up. In the meantime, Electro arrives and sees the Spideys duking it out with the Thor, and Gwen immediately thinks that this might be a perfect opportunity. After all, he's Electro. He's electric powers. He should be able to duke it out with Thor, right? Who's a thunder god, right? It does nothing. Electro blasts Thor, and at best, all that does is just piss her off. And as she ends up blasting at Electro with the lightning blast, then they quickly realize, yeah, that's not going to work. Thankfully, Gwen is able to get Electro out of harm's way, but they also realize that they cannot beat Thor in a fair fight. And so they realize that if they want to end this battle, they need to convince Thor that they're on her side. And so they realize, well, if we take out the siege paralysis, maybe that'll convince her. As such, the Spideys tell Electro to unleash an electric blast right at the chair. But unfortunately, that doesn't do well. In fact, when they blast the chair, it instead starts causing reality to hiccup, causing things to warp, things to get crazy, and unfortunately, before anyone could do anything, it causes a massive feedback that ends up causing an entire section of the Oscorp building to explode, just as Norman and the remaining 6 plus his guards come back. As such, Norman quickly wants to know what the hell is going on, and so he hands Peter over to his guards, tells the 6 to set up a perimeter on the ground floor, while he'll go in to investigate. And sure enough, he goes in, and yeah, from what he sees, he's able to put together what happened with Thor and the Spideys duking it out, and so on and so forth. But this also confirms what he was thinking, that the Spideys and their unique connection to the Web of Life and Destiny actually did end up augmenting the power of the siege paralysis. And well, now that he's got that confirmation and the Spideys have done their job, well, he's ready to take his seat on the throne. And while Billy Braddock does try to stop Norman, well, all this really earns him as a kick in the face, because let's be honest here, getting hit with a reality wave and an explosion just kind of weaken everyone, because yeah, the room that they were fighting in completely destroyed, and everybody's just on the floor unconscious. As such, Norman decides to go screw you guys and sits right in the siege paralysis and puts his helmet on with the intent of getting powered up to duke it out with Dr. Doom. Unfortunately for him, in the meantime, back with Peter Parker, he's being escorted by the guards to some place in Oscorp, I don't know where, but on the way there they end up running into Spider-Ham, and Peter, being Peter, thinks that Spider-Ham is just a hallucination, because, well, he's an anthropomorphic cartoon pig version of himself. With Spider-Ham hears that and thinks, wait, version of you? What are you talking about? And Peter reveals, yeah, I'm Peter Parker, Spider-Man. At which point, Ham was able to put two together because, well, if this guy's Spider-Man, then that means the guards holding him are probably the bad guys. And while the guards tell Ham to back off because Norman actually likes him, Ham also says, yeah, well, I can get hit pretty hard and still get back up. So we get to the point, we get an off-screen moment of awesome as apparently Spider-Ham ends up whooping the guards' asses, and from there, based on what I can tell in the story, Ham frees Peter and brings him up to the siege paralysis room, and sure enough, Peter does have a plan to stop Norman, as while he's getting powered up by the siege paralysis, getting ready to face God and take him out, he ends up getting a jolt right to his cerebral cortex, as while Norman was distracted, Peter grabbed the unconscious body of Thor, placed her hand next to an exposed wire, and her excess power surged through the machine and zapped Norman, pretty much leaving him with brain damage. Though Peter admits that that's probably not going to stick, as apparently that's something like that's happened with Norman before, and he got better. And he's actually not kidding. That has actually happened in the comics. At one point, Norman lost his memory and then got it back. So, yeah, but either way, it will leave him out of commission for a while. However, the Sinister Six end up coming up to the room and quickly realize that Norman's out of commission, but also believe that's with Norman out of the way, that just means they get a chance to take Spider-Man out themselves. However, it's at this point that the remaining the Spideys manage to get their second wind and start getting back up, but the Six still think that they can whoop their asses. But the Spideys end up having their own counter-argument. One thing, Spider-Man Noir ends up sneaking up on Scorpion and holds a gun right to the back of his head. And for another thing, the Spideys explain they still have access to the siege paralysis. And, well, while the Sinister Six may have been able to take them on before, do they really want to go up against them now with those odds? And the end result, the remaining Sinister Six just hold up their hands or surrender. However, once the Six are wrapped up, the Spideys admit, yeah, it was all a bluff. It was all a bluff. I have no idea if Spider-Man Noir was being serious about shooting Scorpion through the head, but yeah, the siege paralysis, yeah, they couldn't get near it the last time without reality going kooky. So yeah, they couldn't use it even if they wanted to. But either way, the job is done. The Six are defeated. Norman is taken down and exposed for the monster he is. But that also kind of leaves the Spideys wondering what's going to happen next. After all, Norman was the Baron of this domain. With him gone, things are going to start getting crazy around New York. And while Spider-Man Noir thinks that maybe a little anarchy would be a good idea to cleanse the palate, so to speak, well, the other Spideys also admits a lot of innocent people could get hurt, so they're going to need protecting. Well, the Spideys admit that, yeah, it's going to be a little hard to do, but it would be nice to share the responsibility for a change, as the story ends with the Spideys essentially affirming to each other that they're going to do their best to keep the city safe together. So, there you go. Alright, so thoughts on the issue and thoughts on the overall story. For starters, I think the issue is fine. It's very action-packed and very dynamic. I would almost say it felt a little rushed in a couple areas, but for the most part, as the finale to the 5-issue miniseries, I think it was dynamic. I think it actually did its job well. At this point, slow moments aren't really a necessity when you're at the climax of your story. So at this point, all the constant action and the fight scenes, I think, really do bring it all together. Helps showcase that this is the end game and that all the pieces are in place to kind of just bring it all down. And I think it does it well. From the Spideys duking it out with Thor to Norman Osborn having a final confrontation with Peter to Peter ultimately defeating Norman just as he's on the cusp of victory, to the finale where the Spideys managed to bluff the Sinister Six into surrendering. It's actually pretty nice, and that's a nice little ending with the Spideys pretty much affirming to each other that no matter what happens next, they're going to be there to help and support one another. So overall, satisfactory ending overall as a whole. But as for my thoughts on the story itself, I think it's a good story. Is it a great story? I'll admit, not really. There are some flaws to it that do hold it back for me. Don't make me hate it, but do hold it back. For starters, the plot. While I do think the plot works for the most part, as it does build a lot of mystery and intrigue and makes you want to know what the heck's happening and does a good job at bringing the Spiders together while also creating a sense of mystery with Norman as the villain, I also feel like we're having two different plots going off at the same time, and the story ultimately favoring one and then forgetting about the other. Case in point, what brings the various Spideys together is them having lingering memories of their time before Battleworld, having lives that don't seem to match up with what they know from living in this domain. We have Gwen Stacy living a full life and yet knowing there's a gravesite with her name on it. We got Spider-Man India, who's an Indian boy who's lived entirely in New York. We've got Billy Braddock, similar case, British, but now living in New York, and without really having an explanation. You got freaking Spider-Ham, who's an anthropomorphic pig who's living in a world of humans, and then Spider-Man Noir, who's straight out of the 30s, now stuck in modern day. I could also mention Anya Corazon, but honestly, in her backstory, she actually was from New York, so I'm gonna let that slide. Though her connection to the group is that she saw Billy and she also had spider powers, so hey, she thought, hey, I could get I could mentor him. Though you could also say that there was lingering memories there because, well, again, prior to Secret War, she did decide to help Billy with his quest to protect the worlds that lost their Spideys, but whatever. Never. Either way, all of these Spideys really do feel out of place, and what brings them together is that sense of not really belonging in this domain. They obviously know that things don't exactly fit up, and it's that mystery that draws them together and wants them to, and makes them try to figure out what the heck's going on and why they're all here. And ultimately, they get somewhat of an answer when they talk to Norman, and he reveals their connection to the web of life and destiny. But unfortunately, that doesn't really answer it doesn't really answer enough of the questions. We, the audience, are able to put the pieces together because, well, we know the remnants of Secret Wars. Even if you haven't read the main story, again, the book does have an explanation in the front of it that explains what's going on with Secret Wars. That the multiverse is destroyed, and that what we're seeing now is just a world that's a patchwork of any remaining parallel universes that Doctor Doom could find. So we can know that, and we can see that, well, the reason why the Spideys remember it is because of their connection to the web of life and destiny. The problem is that the plot line with them trying to pursue this mystery and come to a conclusion, it ends with the revelation of the web of life and destiny. It's like that was put in there for the benefit of the reader, to let them know, okay, this is the reason why the Spideys still remember their lives prior to Battleworld. But in terms of plot relevance, it feels like it's forgotten after that. Because here's the thing. If you woke up one day and started having lingering memories from a life that you don't remember living, and then learning one day that, oh yeah, by the way, that the reason for that is because of this thing you're connected to, and if we can study it, maybe we can send you back to what you're supposed to know, wouldn't you want to know why the heck that was the case? Like, if I woke up one day and learned that these lingering memories are my real life and that the life I know is just a fraud, of course I would want to say, hey, what the heck's going on? What caused this? And I would want to start getting to the bottom of this. Now, in the story's defense, part of the reason the Spideys don't pursue this line of logic is because the one who told them this was Norman Osborn, who, while not lying, only revealed this information to them because he knew that it would placate them and ingratiate him to their side. And the whole reason he wanted that was because the Spidey's connection to the web augmented its powers and could focus it to be utilized by the Siege Paralysis. So I can understand why they wouldn't pursue that logic, but by that same token, wouldn't that also make them want to continue pursuing that line of thought? Even if they thought that Norman was lying, wouldn't they want to see how things worked from then on? Like, maybe they think, they want to think, okay, if we're having these lingering memories, maybe this world is wrong? Like, I understand why they don't pursue the plot line, because again, if they figured out that the multiverse was destroyed, then they would want to find a way to solve the problem, put the world back to the way it was, and thus go back to their respective universes. But the thing is, that plot line was going on in the pages of Secret Wars. In that book, we had heroes from the main Marvel Universe and the Ultimate Universe trying to put the pieces back together and restore the multiverse. That was what was going on there. So of course it wouldn't make sense for it to be here in the story. The problem, however, is when the main draw for having your team of spider people come together is that they realize that something is wrong in the world, then maybe, just maybe, you would want to see them pursue it a little. Which would have been cool if it tied back into the main story. Like, maybe at some point in the Secret Wars storyline, suddenly a team of spider people come in and say, hey, you need help here? Like, that would have been cool. Actually have it lead into that plot thread, like the tie-ins to Spider-Verse. Like, have them set up plot threads that do go back into the main story. That would be cool, but that never ties back into it. At the end of the story, the main concern is what's going on with Norman, which that stuff is not bad. It's actually it's some classic Spider-Man stuff, which, by the way, another little detail, like when Norman goes out to pursue Spider-Man, he's wearing his goblin outfit. He doesn't wear the mask, and he doesn't wear the mask, but it's a green bodysuit, and it's clear he's fully embracing the Green Goblin side again without embracing it, so to speak. So I like that. Kind of fun. And yeah, like I said, that's some classic Spider-Man action. We gotta tussle with the Green Goblin. Him trying to attain ultimate power, trying to overthrow their little god. So again, that makes sense. Makes sense. It's just that, again, when you start with this one plot thread and then start segueing into another, it just makes you wonder what happened to the first plot thread. So I'm gonna call that a problem with the story. And another problem, and this might just be and this is ultimately just a me thing, the artwork. I'm not going to call it awful. Like, when I read through the story again, I think the artwork, for the most part, did work. It was dynamic enough, and it was dynamic, flashy. All the cast of characters were nice, colorful, and varied. You could easily tell one person from another, and nothing felt obtruse or uncanny valley or strange. So for the most part, I think it worked. For me, the biggest problem, however, was, believe it or not, the facial expressions. Like, I'm just going to see if I can find a good example here. Like, look at Spider-Ham here. That is him that's him right there as he's just in the middle of talking. The way he looks, it just looks off. I understand he's supposed to be an anthropomorphic pig, but part of the gimmick with him is that he's an anthropomorphic cartoon pig. And the way he's drawn in that panel makes it look like he's trying to look like a realistic pig in this setting, which it looks weird, is what I'm saying. And if you think, well, it doesn't matter, he's Spider-Ham, right? So I'm guessing he would look like a cartoon with his mask on. Well, guess what? Through the majority of the comic, he doesn't have his mask on. And that applies to the rest of the Spideys, too. A majority of them only wear their masks when they're in battle, whereas in the rest of the time, they have masks off. Now, to be fair, they probably don't have time to just go and get their masks. It's just at the same time, the facial expressions look friggin' weird. Like, sometimes they work well. I will not deny that. Sometimes the facial expressions actually do work well and actually do fit in with the story. But other times they really go into uncanny valley. Like, this is Norman's reaction here after he sees Peter calling him out. It looks weird, is what I'm saying, and it's the way that's that way throughout the story. Sometimes the faces actually look fine and actually do seem to fit. Other times it feels like they're trying to go into uncanny valley without going into the uncanny valley, and as a result, it's like a weird mishmash that just kind of makes you feel uncomfortable when you look at it. Again, I'm not going to claim that that's the worst artwork ever, and it does feel serviceable for the story, and is not even close to Greg Land's and how off-putting that can be sometimes. But for what it is, it still feels strange, is what I'm saying. Just strange and odd, I guess. And if you like the artwork, fine by me. That's your opinion, and I'm not gonna trample on it. It's ultimately just something that bothers me, is what I'm saying. So there you go. But what makes the story still work for me is ultimately everything else. For start, like I said, the stuff with Norman Osborn, while feeling a bit obtrusive, and does feel like it's a plot thread and does feel like a lesser plot thread in comparison to the whole connection with the Web of Life and Destiny thing. It does still feel like a nice standard Spider-Man plot, and I do like the twists and turns with that as well. As throughout the story, you are wondering why Norman is trying to bring the Spideys together. What does he get out of it? Why is he trying to be amicable with them, and so on and so forth. On top of that, throughout the story, you are told that this domain did have a Spider-Man at one point, but you don't know what happened to him. He disappeared years prior, so you're left asking questions about where the heck he went. Is he dead? Did he just go into is he retired? If he is retired, why wouldn't he come out with Norman Osborn in the fray, especially with all these other spider people running around? You are left asking questions, and the more the story goes along, the more you get answers to what the heck's going on. And you start seeing more of the points of divergence between this domain and the main Marvel Universe, especially in relation to Peter Parker, the Clone Saga, Norman Osborn, and so on and so forth. As a multiverse buff, I do like seeing those things, because, yeah, some things are clearly because it's clear that this takes place in Battleworld, but this domain did have a history before the multiverse was destroyed, so I like kind of learning more about that history and how the characters kind of adapt to this altered history and how things go. I like seeing that, and I like how it's expressed throughout the story as we learn more about it. Which, kind of going off of that, I love, like with Spider-Verse, I love the interactions between all the different Spider people. Because each of the Spideys that we see in the story are so vastly different and clearly do not belong in this present day setting, they all feel very nice and unique and distinct enough from each other that they're not just copy-paste versions, alternate versions of Peter Parker. There are similarities between them, but ultimately, out of all of them, only 3 people in the group are alternate versions of Peter Parker. And they're so drastically different versions that they are not, that when it comes down to their demeanors, their personalities, and so forth, they're only Peter Parker in only general terms. And like, again, you can see similarities in them. Like, you see Peter's sense of humor coming out with Spider-Ham, his brain coming out with Pavitr and Spider-Man Noir. But ultimately, they have very different demeanors. And Spider-Man India is a lot more scientifically inclined than the rest of them. Spider-Man Noir is a lot more serious, and Spider-Ham is so goofy that it's almost parody levels. So it's very much clear that they are still distinct and different from what we are used to from Spider-Man, especially in comparison to the other 3 members of their team who are not alternate versions of Peter Parker. Billy Braddock is very serious, but still tries to be still tries to be jovial for the sake of his team. Anya is very much clear the rookie of the group, as she's still learning but still putting her best foot forward. And Gwen is kind of like an outsider, especially considering how her counterpart in this domain is dead, and she just wants to know what the heck happened. And it's that pursuit of knowledge that leads her to seeking out the other spiders and going to Oscorp. Seeing all these unique and different personalities and characters all brought together while still being tied together with the common thread, no pun intended, of being their world's respective spider people, I think it's cool. And they all do work off each other well. All of them because of their varying different demeanors, it leads to them clashing in some areas. It leads to them getting along in others. Like when the team first met Spider-Man Noir, they call him out for his overly gruff attitude, which again, I'll probably call that another minor flaw. I still felt like Spider-Man Noir was pushing it a little too much, but whatever. But then you got stuff like when Billy and Anya met Pavitr for the first time. He was very much more friendly and nice. It's like, oh, hello, can you tell me who your names are? And Billy is at first a little closed off because he doesn't know him. Well, Anya is clearly hesitant, but still more open to talking. I like that. I like seeing that. Or likewise, when the Spideys were working with Norman to study the web of life and destiny, and Anya was just on the sidelines before Spider-Ham went up to her and said, hey, there's a buffet upstairs. You just want to go up there and talk? I like seeing that. I love the interactions, and I especially love when Peter finally enters the fray, because when Peter enters in, while he may not be a spider person anymore, he's still Spider-Man. Yeah, he may not have the powers anymore, but the person that was Spider-Man is still under there, just without the whole red and blue pajamas and all that. So he still has the same heart. He's still willing to work with the team, and technically, he's the one that beats Norman in the end, as Norman sits on the seat paralysis and gets ready to be empowered to fight God Doom, and then Peter just gives him a quick zap with Thor's powers, and it just fries his brain. So, again, creative and nice. Nice, and does lead to some nice stuff there. There's some good humor too, especially with the characters, especially as the characters try and adapt to the situation. Gwen, of course, is kind of like the straight man to everyone's antics, while also kind of indulging in it herself. Like when she first meets Spider-Ham and first freaks out that he's a talking pig before shifting gears and going, "That is awesome!" I genuinely enjoy that. I love that, which I guess most of the humor does kind of come from reacting to Spider-Ham too, especially when he talked about how he was a spider that was bitten by a radioactive pig, which, like, okay, yeah, well, I maybe mixed on the artwork. That reactions in that panel were just hilarious. I love it. But there's I'm trying to think, what else did I like about the story? Sorry, I'm hearing her clicking. But either way, yeah. Excuse me a sec. Sorry about that, I heard something weird. Anyway, like I was saying, I'm just trying to remember any other interactions that I thought were unique and varied, and I thought were also kind of humorous, I suppose. Not really. I guess really most of the humor kind of came from how different the other Spideys were, but the interactions were still pretty nice. Were still fairly strong and nice, especially when they were just kind of shooting the shit and trying to get to know one another. I thought it was nice. I thought it was nice and worked and helped continue building team dynamics. And overall, I thought it was fun. The action I think was actually handled really well, as it really felt fast and dynamic with all the different spider people jumping around and shooting webs and kicking ass and just doing their own thing, which I thought was fun. Fun. Norman Osborn as a villain, I think, kept you on your toes as you wondered what he was doing, but also kind of hinted enough at the bigger picture to figure out what was going on. I liked the twists and turns and seeing where everything went. I loved how everything was. I love how well. Again, everything was nice and colorful, but dark and moody when it needed to be. I loved where things went up going, and overall, I think that Spider-Verse Warzones is a perfectly good story. It taps into being a Secret Wars tie-in enough to kind of take advantage of that, to have the story to bring the story together and have all these different spider people at once. But at the same time, still kind of has fun with Spider-Verse, with having all these different spider people in one place, seeing them interact with one another, and ultimately having to band together to stop a larger threat. In this case, stopping Norman Osborn from gaining access to the powers of a god, which, yeah, again, bad call overall, no matter what. So, at the end of the day, while it wasn't as big or as grand as the original Spider-Verse storyline, I think it still had enough of what made the original storyline fun and kind of condensed it down to a 5-issue miniseries. There weren't as many spider people this time around, but the interactions they had, I think, were solid and fun, but creating nice team dynamics between all of them and making you love seeing them working off each other. It was great. The action was still kick-ass. I loved seeing them grow as a team and seeing them come together, learning what was really going on, both in a meta sense and in the confines of their domain. And ultimately, by the end, it was cool to see the Spideys affirm with each other that, yeah, things may end up going to hell down there, but they'll face it together, and it'll be nice to share the responsibility for a change. So overall, I think this is a good miniseries. Definitely contains a lot of what made the. Definitely, like I said, has everything that has a lot of what made the original storyline work, and condenses it into something smaller but fun. So overall, pretty good miniseries. Not perfect, but still pretty good. So there you go. So yeah, that's about it. Like I said, we have now wrapped up this trade paperback. So when we come back on Saturday, we will be looking at the next installment because, yes, we are still not done with the Spider-Verse era of the Spider-Verse retrospectives. But with that said, there is still more to come. As I mentioned, Secret Wars was eventually undone, and the multiverse was restored. And with the multiverse restored, that means that Billy's mission of being a protector to the worlds that lost their Spider-Man was renewed. But let's just say he didn't do it alone. This team of Spideys did not disband after the multiverse was fixed. Well, let's just say that there were quite a few adventures for them ahead as they once more dived into the Spider-Verse. So next time we meet, we'll be seeing those adventures play out as we take a look at an ongoing comic and see the debut of the multiversal team of Spideys known as the Web Warriors. So till then, hope you have a good evening. See you on Saturday, and take care.